Hello, PMW editorial team. We've got everyone back in studio for the final episode of Performance Marketing Unlocked Season 3. How are we all feeling about the year coming to a close?
Feeling festive.
We're feeling festive. We're looking festive as well. I've got everyone in our Christmas sweaters for our December episode. What have you got there, Jyoti? A penguin?
Yeah, I've got penguins and snowballs.
Oh, amazing.
Good combo.
Some reindeer in.
Mine doesn't really show, but yes, I have some reindeers on my jumper.
And Robin, what have we got there?
I've been in all morning. No one's got the reference yet. Has no one actually seen what this is?
Oh, is it
Stranger
Stranger
Things?
There we go. See,
Nice.
I mean, I've been waiting all morning for confidence. Finally, I got you in the
Do you know
podcast
what?
studio.
This is the first time I properly looked at your
Yeah.
jumper.
Me
I'm
too.
So.
There you
They've
go.
got the Merry Christmas as the upside down.
Yeah, very much looking forward to season 5 on Netflix next year.
Oh, amazing. I've fallen off the Stranger Things wagon, actually. Maybe I'll get back into it. But yeah, I've got my snowboarding snowmen for the year. But no, we're all feeling very festive and looking equally festive too. But it's a bit of everyone says this, it's a bit of a cliche, but the year really has gone by in a flash, hasn't it?
Yeah, too fast sometimes, I'm thinking.
We were saying on last week's episode, Jyoti, that you've just recently marked a year with the brand.
Yeah, end of November was a year since I joined PMW.
Wow. So there's a lot of personal milestones. And Reem, I know you're sort of into the throes of the first half year. How are you finding your first
it's been
golden
8
quarter?
months. It's been like nearly a year now, which is crazy. But I feel like there's still so much to learn about the performance marketing world and so much I want to unlearn about the performance marketing world and try and change up a little bit. But it's been good. It's been very fun and I'm excited for 2025.
Me too. Certainly, it's been the first season of the podcast I've hosted myself, and as I've been telling everyone, I'm still getting to grips with the whole producing, hosting, and editing side of things. So the fact that we're about to come back for a new season in the new year is super exciting. But we can't round out the season of the podcast or the year itself without doing a little bit of a review of 2024, as well as talking about the year ahead and what to expect for Adland in 2025. Robin, I'm going to come to you as our editor, head honcho, as we've dubbed
Still
you
sticking with that one there, Joe.
throughout
Thank
the show. Looking back at 2024, what's a story, a trend, something that's popped up that really surprised you this year?
Yeah, well, obviously we've had Google's cookie U-turn, the Google DOJ stuff. We're going to touch upon that. We're going to talk about AI. But I wanted to pick out something that was a bit more unusual that stood out for me this year. And it was Elon Musk suing GARM for an alleged brand boycott of X, which happened back in August. I think a lot of people, it was as a shocking news story. It was one that we didn't see coming. GARM is the Global Alliance for Responsible Media run by the World Federation of Advertisers. It started with a very, I would say, honourable aim back in the pre-COVID days of 2019 for a place to promote brand safety for brands, and it was a small organisation set up by the WFA, only a tiny number of employees, but it attracted over 100 major brands worldwide. And Elon Musk took offence to the fact that what he called a brand boycott of X because of its questionable new direction he took it, let's say that. But it essentially boiled down to Elon Musk suing advertisers for not advertising on his website, which is, I mean, as a media owner myself, I see myself alongside Elon Musk in that respect. If advertisers want to advertise on PMW and reach our highly qualified audience, that's a brilliant idea. But if you decide not to advertise on PMW, it's all right. We won't sue you. It's all right.
You happy putting that on record?
Yeah. But Musk might think differently about suing advertisers for just choosing not to advertise on his platform. But sadly, it meant GARM had to shut down.
It was sad, and I remember GARM, they were sort of the belle of the ball in Cannes because their sustainability standards were launched during that week, and they were sort of the headline sustainability movement, certainly during that week out in the south of France. For a topic, sustainability, I think we'll get into it later, but was maybe a little under the radar this year, as much as I had expected coming into it. And yeah, the WFA sort of forced more or less to shut GARM down. So we hold out hope that maybe they'll be in a position in the future to bring GARM or something GARM adjacent back into the fold, because I think they were sort of a necessary good, and it's a real shame that they're no longer around.
And with Musk's elevated role now as buddy in chief I think next year brand safety will be even more on the agenda for a lot of brands, thinking about where their media appears and stuff. There are lots of other, ways brands can ensure brand safety, and there's lots of options out there. But it was a shame to see this collaborative initiative have to shut down. I mean, the argument against it was kind of blacklisting and that kind of thing. But it's I think collaboration is better than the alternative.
I think Elon Musk could have just approached the whole thing very, very differently, because the reason advertisers were boycotting X was because there was a lack of content moderation, and they were scared that it was going to ruin their brand image and it's not going to be safe for brands. And what Elon Musk could have done is just had a lot more moderation going on and had made it a much more safe space for brands to be advertising on, and that could have worked. But instead he went down the suing them route, which I think is just fits in Musk's entire image of throwing tantrums whenever things don't go his own way.
The thing about Elon is, and I almost respect him for it, is he holds true to his ideals, certainly with respect to freedom of speech, because he's quite happily sacrificing X's ad revenue, dying on that hill, by saying freedom of speech, whether that be good, bad, what have you, people are entitled to do it, and the platform's going to let it be there. And it's certainly, I think some of the user base have really appreciated that, but then the brands and the advertisers, obviously we're seeing the consequences in the dramatic dip in ad revenue. But truly, what he said when he said the advertisers in Cannes, I don't think he's all that bothered. And the one thing about Elon is he's a pretty damn successful businessman. So it's, who are we to sort of question his tactics when he's now basically sitting there in the right-hand man of the President of the United States. So what do we know?
Well, when we were writing how the big, massive drop in ad revenue with X was happening, it was like that was never the point of why he bought X in the first place. And we do see the point of why he bought it. But in terms of freedom of speech, I think there's an element of, is it freedom of speech or freedom of elevated speech? I went onto X on a completely neutral platform recently because I had to, and the first thing I saw was Elon Musk, first four posts from Elon Musk, even though he wasn't followed. So there's questions about the algorithm within that.
Yeah, I'm tired of seeing Elon Musk on my algorithm.
Yeah, I was going to say this. Also, are you using it as a platform to advocate your voice, which may not be culturally sensitive, or it could be inappropriate, and that's where it becomes a little bit dangerous, I would say, especially for younger users that are on the platform.
Yeah. For brands looking to get on something that's X adjacent, though. Obviously, Blue Sky has flooded into popularity, and you can follow PMW there for those of you who don't. But Elon aside, certainly the GARM sustainability and the outcomes of that were a little bit of a shame, but it's one we hold out hope for in the future from a sustainability perspective. Reem or Jyoti, anything surprise the pair of you? And I'm actually going to take my headphones off because I just looked at us in the camera and it looks a little odd having me on. So listeners who aren't watching this, I'm taking my headphones off. So if the audio takes a sudden dive, you know why. But for the sake of appearances, I'll dump this. But any surprises, Reem and Jyoti?
For me, I wouldn't say it's the biggest surprise, but I feel like this big tech battle, the competitive nature of some of the tech giants sort of went up a notch this year, with especially between Apple, Google and Meta. All three had been investigated by the EU's I think it was the EU Commission for breaching the digital laws. I know you might touch upon this a bit later, but Google's also facing its antitrust trial. But for example, Apple introduced a 30% fee for advertisers looking to boost their posts across Facebook and Instagram using iOS devices, so that's like iPhone or your iPad. And then Meta responded by saying, oh, well, if you want to avoid these fees, use this method or go on desktop. So it's always that sort of back and forth. And I think, and it's interesting to see how this is going to play out and who's actually going to rise to the top, or are we going to see something else come to fore here?
With Meta doing the paying for different options, I think also there's publishers doing that too with the pay or consent.
Do you know what?
That was a shocking thing from this
that
year.
did surprise me. And
Yeah.
as someone that comes from a newspaper background, newspapers, when they went online, it was free news to access for people. So we're seeing them trying a new paying model, and I'm not sure it will work, but we'll see.
That's one to watch. It'd be interesting to see where
Yeah.
it goes in the future. But on the state of big tech and the big tech battle, I see what you mean, because it feels like an oligopoly, all of tech, and even among smaller ad tech, it's just a waiting game until one of the big players sort of buys you out and adds you to their roster.
And that's definitely been the trend, like the past few years. But this year we've seen a lot of M&A activity, and the other interesting thing is there's not been as much startups, so there's been less private equity cash going through. So what will be interesting is, come a few years' time, when usually the startups get to be bought up by these big companies, what's going to happen? Because there isn't as many startups as there were, say, a few years ago.
Yeah, there's only less innovation maybe, but it might just be a huge amount of AI is going to take up that sort of lower funnel, the investment and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting. I mean, obviously, Jyoti, you have that great aerial view with all the merger and acquisition activity.
Yeah, those mergers and acquisitions roundups. So that's something that surprised you, I suppose, was the lack of startups coming in. Maybe, I guarantee we're going to hear from a bunch of startups now that we're just not shining a light on
Well, I
the
think
that they
this
are
is-
out there.
Yeah, it's probably, maybe it's not being talked about as much, because we're talking about the acquisitions that are happening, or the mergers that are happening, of these smaller businesses that have been 2-3 years already. But it's the ones that are starting up now. So what's going to happen to them in the next 2, 3, 4 years? And if there's less of those compared to when the ones that happened this year started, what's going to be the dynamic in the industry? How is that going to evolve?
On the big tech battle, a lot of the data that these giants hold is obviously very valuable for advertisers and marketers, and everyone's trying to get their finger in the pie a little bit. And that's what surprised me the most this year. Was it wasn't the fact that Google scrapped cookie deprecation, but it was the industry's reaction to that news, particularly with the sort of faux emphasis on data privacy. And people are putting out there that it's top of their agenda, and first-party data. But a pay or consent model from publishers shows that they really still want to hold on to third-party cookies if they can. The fact that they are going to hang about, and a lot of the industry reaction was like, phew, wiping a sweaty brow, as opposed to being, oh, what? We were super prepared. All the data's still saying there's very little real examples of people actually being first-party prepared.
It was supposed to happen in 2025, at the start of 2025, wasn't it? And then the news of them cancelling that was only a few months ago. So the fact that they got to that point and they still didn't have anything prepared means that they were in trouble for 2025. They were going to be in trouble if they didn't have any alternatives by that point.
It seemed like we were heading for just a repeat of GDPR in some ways.
That's kind of where we are now. What Google's going to offer is more of a you can choose at the point of entry with Chrome, whether you want another opt-in. Basically, is what you're going to have now.
The opt-in model, I think it's brought it to the attention of users a little bit more, because a lot of the research that's come through is there's quite a good amount of consumers who plan to not opt in and to reject cookies. And that will sort of potentially, that trend, I imagine, will only increase as time goes on. And that might force the hand of these advertisers. And even if there's third-party cookies on Chrome, you're going to have to get to first-party data, because it's no good if all these users reject them.
And I think there's an element of, I don't want to say fear-mongering, but maybe a level of education that's needed, because a lot of consumers are thinking, oh, I don't want them to use my data, but they don't necessarily know how they're using that. Their go-to is to automatically reject like non-essential cookies.
But rejecting them initially, I think it will force the hand a little bit of these data collectors, because the trade-off consumers are willing to make is good, responsible personalization in exchange for their data. third-party cookies don't do that. So consumers shouldn't be giving away their third-party data to third parties if it's not going to be used responsibly. So really, it needs to be good quality, anonymized first-party data that then is going to be turned around in valuable, personalized advertising for the consumers. And they're willing to make that exchange. It's just whether or not Adland's willing to do the work up front to put that into practice. And that's one we're going to have to watch. But it did surprise me. And there was a column I wrote that was just Adland's not holding up its end of the data privacy bargain. And I think that was a big disappointment and shock for me as someone looking at the industry this year. It was claims of cookieless preparedness. That turned out not to be true. But then there was this little bit of a rejoice, the fact that third-party cookies are hanging around, and yet everyone goes on and on about their data privacy and how dear it is to them that they're responsible with their users, and these two things are just in total opposition.
It's funny you say that, because you've just reminded me of something else that I noticed this year, which was when I did the workforce report. And it's almost like when we say about greenwashing, diversity washing, people are saying they're doing things, but actually the figures show something else, that, you know, the industry is really struggling with being more diverse and inclusive.
Well, are you about to invent the word privacy washing? I thought you were cusp of it there, JT.
Ooh,
but
I think we should.
Now.
There's gonna be an article.
Because I think that will be a trend as well.
There you go.
Like...
There's your next column, JT. You can have that one.
That's a
Thanks,
freebie
Robin.
right there. I'd be trademarking that.
I'm sure if we do a search for it, someone's already came up with
Privacy washing, data washing. It's a good point though, and I think a lot of the frustration the industry has with consumers is consumers don't always behave the way that they say they're going to. But nor do we. Marketers and advertisers clearly don't always behave the way that they're going to. So it's a very human thing that will do as I say, not as I do. And if no one's really holding up their end of the bargain, well, we can't really get frustrated.
The biggest mistake you can make is to think about it from a consumer point of view. We always forget they're the fifth one in this whole marketing ecosystem, actually the sixth one in the whole marketing ecosystem we don't talk about often. We just talk to ourselves, talk to the ad techs or the media owners, but we forget that we have very little mental availability as a customer. And when we're actually on shopping, we just pick that nice bottle of wine that looks cool. And there's a lot that goes on that's really happening on a simple level, and you really kind of have to forget that sometimes.
Yeah. Although I will say, like, one of the things that I noticed this year is there might actually be a lack of attention on consumers from marketers. There was a bit of research that was saying that what a marketer thinks their audience is very far off from what their audience actually is and what they want. And I think that's hopefully something that's gonna change for next year. But like, one example is short form versus long form. I think there's a lot of marketers that talk about short attention spans and how Gen Z, especially by using platforms like TikTok and using platforms like Instagram, they're just used to those like 10, 15, maximum 30-second videos. But actually what we're going to be seeing is a lot more long form content being created and more brands taking advantage of long form content, and things like Twitch live streams, for example, which Joe, you've written about. People would actually sit down and willingly watch someone live stream for 3 hours playing a video game, and they love it.
This is what I can't get my head around. Like, Gen Z won't watch a beautiful 2-hour film like me, old school. I can watch a 2-hour film and love it. They'll get bored, but they can watch a Twitch stream of someone just talking and playing a video game for 2 hours, which in my opinion is pretty boring. But I'm not that audience, and there's lots of people like that. It's a new kind of long form.
But even TikTok, like, people will watch their favorite influencers live stream on TikTok for a couple of hours, and they'd be talking nonsense. Like, it would be a mukbangs.
Yeah.
Like, which is just someone sitting down and eating their dinner. But they love that kind of content, and that's something that's definitely going to become more and more of a trend. And it's one of those things that brands and marketers need to be focusing on, and need to be seeing how their consumers are kind of shifting the kind of content they want, and how their attention is shifting.
And the key thing for marketers is to think about why what they're doing there for those 2 hours. What is that need that it's serving that audience? What are Gen Z getting from those 2 hours of? Is it like more of a community thing? That's what they're seeking, something like that, that authentic connection.
I think as well, what they need to also bear in mind is Gen Z are coming into that sort of age where they're working, so they've got more spending power. So that sort of suits your point, Robin. But they also need to take into account Gen Alpha that are coming through as well. Because from what I've seen and some of the research I've read, Gen Alpha is actually quite different to Gen Z.
Yeah.
Their values in that are a bit more closer aligned to millennials. So,
But Gen Alpha also has an influence on like the boomer generation as well.
Pest the power.
So,
Pest the power.
yeah, exactly. And it's like
a
you're
nice phrase as
targeting
well.
two at once. So it's when you get Gen Alpha, you're getting their parents. When you get Gen Z, you're just getting Gen Z because most of them are in their 20s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, often neglected there. I think when you get Gen Alpha, you're also getting Gen X. I think that's the generation that's often never talked
I'm
about.
Gen X. No one remembers Gen X. We were the cool ones. We were the cool ones.
Gen X was
We're the
certainly-
Breakfast Club generation. We don't care about anything. We're just too cool.
I think Gen X was certainly the lowest maintenance from what I can gather. But I want to move on to some of our predictions for the year ahead, some of the trends that are percolating and the things we expect to see, hot takes, platforms set to take off. And that long form versus short form debate's a really good one. And I did cover that with Twitch, and I think they're a perfect example of the scope for long form content, particularly among younger audiences, because they do love it. They love streaming. And it's not just gaming, it's music and DJs and cooking and, as you said, eating in some respects. The other thing that gives rise to long-form content is second screening too. People are willing to sit down and watch something, but they'll have their eyes going around.
Yeah.
Maybe they're scrolling TikTok while they're watching TV. Another good example is sports are a big one where people like watching sporting events, but they'll have a second screen going of a streamer, a YouTuber, someone on Twitch reacting to the event that they're watching on that second screen. So there's certainly scope for brands to get involved on the long form and the short form. So that's a big trend to watch in the year ahead. But Robin, what about you? What's your hot takes and your predictions for 2025?
It's a lot to. It's hard to decide on one actually. The things that are going to just get bigger, I think, are things like TikTok Shop. We've kind of just touched upon that with social. Watch the OpenAI browser. That's going to be the next phase from Sam Altman. And I think the potential sell-off of Chrome, I think, it's kind of missing the point. I don't think that will actually happen, but I think because Google isn't competing with Bing anymore, it's competing with Amazon as a search engine, it's competing with TikTok as a search engine, that the battle lines have shifted. I think maybe this is a court case that's 10 years too late. So I think the changing media landscape and the options for brands and advertisers to buy on it is just more vast and more fractured than ever before. And then we've got connected TV. I know someone else, we're going to touch on that later on. And that kind of meeting point of first party data with digital out of home and screens and connected TV. I've just been talking to ITV and Channel 4, and they're really interesting postcode level of targeting. I think our friend Mike Fantis from that group who we had on the show,
scaling your localized targeting.
Yeah, he called it his postcode the new cookie. It's I think geo targeting is all very interesting. So that kind of meeting point is going to be. It's not going to be about platforms as much. It's going to be about the audience and knowing them and meeting them where they are. And it's a much more complicated story than it was 5 years ago for a media planner, I think. But I wanted to quickly, because I'm not very articulate about this stuff, and there was a really good speech. I'm going to quickly quote a bit of it, if you don't mind, Joe.
No, absolutely. Take it away.
It's really worth saying because it was from the IPA Effectiveness Awards, and anyone who knows, that's one of the most prestigious awards in the UK. This year, their chair of judges was Catherine Kehoe, who was Chief Customer Officer at Retail Bank at Lloyds Banking Group, and we know Lloyds Banking Group very well. We know Suresh Balaji and Nick Travis there, but she gave a really good speech. We got quoted a lot this year in Adland, and it was kind of like a clarion call for where we are, and I've just taken a few excerpts from it. And she said, sadly, in a world where 90% of clicks on most forms of mobile display advertising are accidental, and everyone knows that reality, it's very different. And the growing weakness of TV as a mass reach and mass event medium is well documented. While data's privacy laws mean the huge machine learning data opportunities now sit within walled gardens controlled by Google, Meta and others. And so we're increasingly entering a world where brands are built in the armies of influencers, brand partnerships, collaboration, and by in-feed and in-game activations. Hand-to-hand marketing is replacing fire and forget. And that means we're all learning lessons every day in so many ways. And I love that final phrase there. It's not all about fire and forget, which is like, you made a beautiful ad, you stuck it on TV in the old days, and you've stuck it on print. And then about 10 years ago, you made a beautiful ad and you stuck it on Meta, or Facebook and Google, and that was it, fire and forget. Nowadays, it's hand-to-hand marketing, because there's so many different channels, so many different platforms. You've got to really, as a marketer, you've just got to be working every day. It's a harder job, folks. That's the thing.
But it's a more valuable one, I think, as well. And collaboration's the calling card there. And real-time optimization too. It's going back on active campaigns and making adjustments based on the data you're getting. And that can go right up the funnel, even to these brand building activations, because of technology like digital out of home and these newer metrics to track things like brand uplift and attention's another big metric. Jyoti, what about you?
So I think it's going to be about CTV and audio next year as the two sort of channels that are going to see more investment. Now, interestingly, CTV has been growing quite a bit this year, but so the figures we've seen from our media spend index show that this year people didn't see a lot of return on investment, yet they still see it as a viable channel, and they're still willing to increase investment in it next year. And audio is another interesting one, because we've seen how big it is in the US, and we think it's going to be big here, and people are talking about it, but we're not seeing people invest as much. So it's a space I think we need to watch, because I personally think that, yeah, it is going to get bigger here, but I think people are still hesitant to invest in it.
It needs, I think both channels just still need a little bit of tinkering, and CTV feels a little further along, which is why people are sort of sticking by it, because that data you refer to from the Media Spend Index was really interesting to look at, because this year just gone, big amounts of investment in CTV, but return on that investment wasn't enormous. Audio, there wasn't as much investment, certainly here in the UK in that channel, nor was the return off the charts. It sort of mirrored CTV in that respect. But then looking ahead, redoubling efforts in CTV is on the horizon, and audio, it appears it might continue to be neglected somewhat, even though it is such a growth channel in the US.
Yeah, people are talking about investing in it, so we're not seeing the two align at the moment.
It's two different expectations.
I do hear whispers of people that work on the audio side. I can't say too much here. Have these off the record chats. But one of the things they said is some of the brands are really big spenders on Spotify and audio. They are being so successful with their return on investment, they're keeping quiet about it. And this is often the case across Adland, where they're kind of hiding their secret sauce. They don't want everyone else to know. They want to do a good thing. And it's a natural thing for a brand. If you found a channel and you found a loop where other people aren't really investing, they've kind of worked it out. Sometimes they go quiet. It's often we get the same with case studies. The best case studies, I'm afraid, listeners, we can't always share, because then they go, actually, sorry, suddenly we realise there's a competitive advantage if we share it on PMW, and it's a similar thing I've been told. But so there is, if you're thinking about audio, it might be worth giving it a second look. Podcasts and on other areas.
I wonder if that's also
certainly podcasts.
Yeah, great, Joe. Yeah, you're going to do a few show reads.
I wonder if that's also a bit of smart thinking regarding costs for media spend, because if not many people are investing in it, it's going to be obviously lower. The more people start to invest, the prices naturally will go up, because they'll become more competitive.
Also, audio is a space that you can't really afford for it to be getting that competitive, because the way that you're going to be successful advertising in audio is advertising to those niche spaces that fit within your brand, and then you get those niche audiences, and they're the ones who are the most engaged. But then if more brands and marketers start coming into it, then that is going to become very competitive to start advertising to the right ones, and then you're going to end up losing out on that channel that is actually benefiting you a lot. So it makes sense that they're keeping quiet about it.
Similar with a lot of the more established channels, they kind of get flooded, and then the prices rise and fall and stuff. But it's a first move advantage, definitely.
If that's the case, and they are keeping a little quiet on it, I think next year audio is certainly one to watch and to see if things differ to what we were expecting. But the CTV front, it's so fragmented and it's competitive among offerings and consumers. Your audience is in so many different places, as are the offerings, and now you've got different formats within that. I think CTVs are much broader based than people understand. It's AVOD, it's SVOD, it's fast, it's linear TV in some respects. I know you just spoke to Channel 4, Robin, as well.
Well, I mean, they were one of the original ad-supported streamers in the UK, obviously, with 4ID back in nearly 20 years ago.
Exactly. So it's been around a long time, and every advertiser I speak to thinks they're about to crack it, and they just haven't. And it's things like retail media and digital out of home.
We got the Trade Desk this last week, getting into the sort of open,
unified ID, the open web. They're a bit sexier,
system,
and they're returning a little bit quicker, I think. So we might see people.
Yeah, and this is something I touched upon in my column, but it's become. There's an argument to say it might have become a bit too fragmented because
certainly.
And this is from both the consumer side of where they can go to watch, as well as from the marketer side, because you've got different CTV operating system, different platforms, different streaming services, and I think there might be a case, and we might see this in the US first because of how their cable TV and models work, that we're going to start to see bundlings, where they're bundling different packages up, because that's also then becomes more cost effective for the consumer. And I'm wondering whether some of the smaller ones, for example Roku, we know that their shares have fallen last quarter, will get bought out by maybe some of the bigger.
That's a bold claim, but
I'm wondering.
It's
that's
a
what
hot
I
take.
Well, no, it's a good one, mate.
Sort of postulate on that.
Vizio, obviously, with Walmart.
Yeah.
And Walmart have been all over this, actually. But if I can postulate a bit with a hot take, because I think you're leaning in the right direction there, Jyoti, is you've got Amazon, I think, are the big mover in this respect. And Guy Mayers from Recurly, who was on the previous episode of the show talking about subscription models, he brought up that idea of bundling and these sort of cross partnerships on your subscriptions, and Amazon's a good example of that because of its Prime offering as well as its e-commerce offering and bringing those together. But there's rumours that Prime's even going to partner with other streaming services to be able to stream some of their content on its platform. It also recently brought Freevee back into its own branding, so it's making moves on this front. It makes me think it's Amazon. They're going to do something big next year.
Well, if anyone that does have Amazon Prime now, I only got Prime 2 days ago, and but they have within Prime you can have a subscription to Paramount. You can have a subscription to different live sports, and I didn't even know that cricket was on there, NFL,
It's already happening within the subscription space, but then Prime with ads will.
They've got their ad tier, they've got their ad-free tier. You can also, it's not. It sounds like a big ad for Prime. It's not. I promise you. I just think they're doing some good things. But within that as well, they've got the free-to-me content, and then you've got the one-off rental and purchases you can make.
Yeah.
It's just an abundance of choice there, I think, which is why consumers. That's what attracts consumers is freedom of choice, and they can get what they want from it.
If you want to talk about competitors, we've got in the UK, we've got Sky partnering with Netflix to bring you more options, as well as a lot of
sport there happening on Netflix too.
Exactly. So
if you can call Tyson versus
I knew I was waiting. I heard a snicker and I'm
Well, I think I heard someone say YouTube absolutely slaughtered Netflix because they kind of ran a similar thing. Well, I've forgotten his name. That YouTuber guy, what was his name? The Beat Tyson.
Logan
Help me
Paul.
out. Logan,
Jake Paul.
Jake Paul. Yeah. But he'd done something on YouTube for free, and had said how much money they'd made through the ad stuff with YouTube. But then the Netflix thing was this paid thing, and didn't quite because all the buffering and stuff. But anyway, let's start that. I'm way out of my comfort zone in this conversation now. So
we'll pivot. Reem, what about you? What's your? I know you'll have a couple of hot takes in the holster for us.
Well, okay. Yes, so there's a few. You've touched on the DOJ trial. That would be interesting to see if that's going to have any effect on the ad industry, because we were talking about it this morning,
won't.
and that's what I'm thinking, because we were talking about it this morning, and within the industry, it seems like this is the biggest trial that's taking place right now, and Google could be breaking down and might actually sell Chrome, and I don't actually think any of that is going to happen, and I actually don't think that anyone who's outside of the industry actually cares about Google versus the DOJ, and I don't think there will be an effect, and if there is an effect, it might take a while for it to actually happen. So
it's tied to the US geography too, which is already a little bit of the Wild West when it comes to regulations. And I'm skeptical on the short-term impact, I should say. In the long term, I think there could be some changes that certainly come from this trial, absolutely. Particularly if the CMA pushes here in the UK and Europe for the changes it wants Google to make as well. But in the short term, I don't see it having a huge impact.
No.
In the long term, things might develop though.
And I also, the other hot take that I wanted to, well, maybe it's not really a hot take, but it's more of a prediction for what's going to happen next year. There was a story I wrote this week about Hearst having 175 employees laid off, and it's because they're going into a future that's focused on digital innovation, which is
in other words, is your job's getting replaced by
exactly,
AI.
Exactly. And I think, unfortunately, I think this will be a common trend that's going to start happening within the publishing, but also within just the marketing industry generally, because 100 of these jobs were in sales and marketing that were affected. And I don't think it's something that's avoidable at this point. So there's no, I mean, of course, it's something that's going to be sad, and there's going to be a lot of freaking out about, oh my God, my job's going to be replaced by AI. But I think what people need to be doing is getting a bit more smart and trying to understand how AI works, what can they do that AI can't, and how to basically evolve their role to work with AI. And I think that's how you could keep your job, and this is how you could shine, because it will happen no matter what you do, and no company's going to say we're not going to be using AI anymore, because otherwise they're going to be leaving themselves very disadvantaged. And I think I saw someone on LinkedIn who said that there's going to be a new role of a journalist, which is I forgot the name, programmatic writer or something. No, I'm probably getting that very But anyway, they were talking about the evolving role of a journalist that works with AI, and I think the same is gonna be with marketers. But I also think on the topic of AI generally, I think there will be a lot more regulation that's going to happen next year, or a lot more calling for regulation, because there's platforms like, I think, Blue Sky, you mentioned that earlier. There was an article this week about although Blue Sky is saying that it's not making the content of people's users, or like the content that people are posting, they're not selling it to train AI models. It's still public. So there are people that are coming onto the platform and without people's consent taking that information and training their AI models. And I think that will start happening more and more. So I think there will be a call for more regulation about using data to train AI next year. So, sorry, there was a lot of hot takes.
But I think it's worth saying, like 20 years ago, a lot of jobs exist now didn't exist 20 years ago, and it'll probably be the same case, but it's just accelerating. It's hard to know. Every industrial revolution, this is the fourth industrial revolution, has completely changed the job landscape, but it's normally sort of created as many jobs as it's lost. I'm just not so sure this time, because AI is a creative thing rather than a productive thing.
Yes.
It's that's where the kind of worry comes from. It can do stuff that, because you could always say, a printing press can't actually write the thing, but this time we're kind of creating it can write. So it's interesting.
It'll be sink or swim next year. Like, it's not new information, the fact that people are going to have to figure out how to incorporate AI. We've known that all year. You've got to figure out how to work with AI instead of against it, particularly in the world of marketing and journalism.
Mm-hmm.
But those that use it as a tool and an asset, you've got to figure out a way to do it. We all do. Everyone listening does. But you're right, Reem. There'll be people that don't have the opportunity to, and they'll be out there having to find different job opportunities.
Isn't this Joe? You're the one that's not using AI.
And I famously...
he's a Luddite. He's an AI Luddite listener.
But I mean,
I'm stubbornly against it, but I'm open to the idea. Frankly, though, it's not yet impacting me, so we'll wait and see. But it will.
And
Are you saying something's coming for me, Rob?
No, you're very safe, irreplaceable, Joe. I think we all know
The next
that.
episode of the podcast
Yeah.
is actually going to be hosted by AI.
Oh, no, you've got the Spotify DJ.
It'll be a deep fake of Joe.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
it
right.
is.
So I was going to sort of counter your point about regulation, and this is...
I already know I'm going to agree with you.
So there are rumours that Trump's administration may push to deregulate industries, which I think will be a major concern for AI. So Sam Page, who's the CEO and founder of 7 Dots, which is like a digital innovation company, said that without robust AI regulation, we risk a future dominated by biased algorithms. And I think that's actually true. And if Trump's administration does go ahead with deregulating, I think there's going to be a lot of brands that are going to be concerned about brand safety. And then from the consumer side, I think we need to watch this space. Like, what is actually going to happen with regulation? Because, yeah, people are going to call for it, but are we actually going to see it?
That's the thing, isn't it? I agree with both of you, Riemann, that there's going to be more calls for regulation. Absolutely, people are going to be doing that. But on your point, Jyoti, I don't know that regulation is going to be able to keep pace with innovation. Certainly not if you've got a Trump administration that is rumoured to be open to deregulating a
They're
lot
not
of the
exactly
industry in the
going to
market.
let China leap ahead right now, are they?
No.
That's not exactly going to be in Trump's regime.
He's thinking, I think, from a business sense that if you regulate, you can inhibit innovation, but at the same time, you need some form of regulation to ensure safety for users, ensure things like what I just mentioned, deep fakes.
He's going to start regulating when he sees the deep fakes with him and Elon.
Yeah,
But
deepfakes is a serious...
They're already around.
But I
Yeah,
think
that's a real concern.
Yeah, but regulation in terms of safety is important. But I think sort of regulation in terms of efficiency, because if you're just going to build bad AI models, if you're not basing it on the, but the thing is like the sort of biased algorithms is very true. But I think we've already seen that last 10 years, we are increasingly seeing sort of algorithms and people leaning into algorithms to kind of get better exposure and stuff, and so we're already kind of feeling this is the algorithm era, and we've got to try and break through that already. So I think that has been rolling along for the last 10 years, and it might just accelerate somewhat with AI kind of accelerating everything.
Yeah, so then do you think it's up to the industry to self-regulate, I guess?
People acting in good faith won't go astray, and consumers in particular will respond to that. Even in the B2B scope, your clients and your partners will respond to you acting in good faith as you always do. And if you're going to be a business that doesn't use AI in good faith, it's not historically acting in bad faith isn't really an approach that's going to work in the long term. It might get you some short-term wins, but in my opinion, it's unsustainable. I'm calling out the tech industry. You brought this forth. I think you need to try and come up with some technology that can regulate it, or at least differentiate between good and bad AI. Knowing, has something come from a biased algorithm? Is something a deep fake? Certainly on that point of, we need technology that can filter for us what's real and what's not.
I also think it would help in terms of labeling what's AI and what's not, because I don't think
We've
you always
seen
need
that already, but it's not brilliant.
But and I don't think it's always necessary to label if something is AI. I think that's going to be a red flag for consumers when they see that something's AI generated, and they're not going to want to read it. But even like there's things that I work on where I use AI to just help summarize things so that it makes my writing a lot faster to do, and then I have more time in my day. And if I were to label that as AI generated, first of all, it's false because the entire thing is not AI generated. And second of all, people will come onto the article, see a label that says AI generated and be like, oh no, I don't like AI, and they won't read it. So I think there needs to be a limit of like, okay, when is something 100% AI generated or so AI generated to the point where you need to label it?
No, I
and when do you
disagree.
need to not label it?
If there's a whiff of AI, I want it sniffed out because
hold
then
on.
I never need to learn.
Well,
So
does that mean no
I-
one's used a spell checker on Google Docs? Because
'Cause
that's AI. That's
and
still
I-
based on AI.
No,
'Cause
you're
you
right.
use AI
in
for the podcast.
You're right in that the scope of use of AI certainly needs to be delineated.
I feel like if I get in my car and use my sat nav was AI generated. my journey to work was AI generated. But I think we have been using AI without necessarily. I think it's more overt. But I think the human at this.
I think it's
the generative side of it too makes things slightly different.
And I think it's maybe more for things like images and video content, and even things like people's voices. You know, actual content that might depict someone that's in real life, or something where it could blur the boundaries about what's real and what's fake. So,
but is it harmful if you don't label it?
I'm thinking about, like, for example, Kate Middleton's that fake photo that AI generated.
Can be very
that's the sort of level where we need to have something in place that can tell us that, oh no, this was AI generated.
But if it's say it's a podcast ad, and it's based on a brief from a brand, and they couldn't get someone to do a host read, so they got consent from the person they wanted to do the host read because they didn't have time, got consent from them to use their voice, but AI generated to do that ad that's scripted by a human. Would you then have to label it as AI? Because if you don't, I don't think that harms the listener.
This is for greater minds than ours to determine.
Yeah.
But you're both right in that there are certainly cases where it absolutely is necessary that something needs to be labelled as AI because it's harmful if it doesn't. But then, sure, if there's no harm to the user, why label it? I think the blurred line there is that's very subjective, whether something is and isn't harmful. I mean, we live in a time where people can't even agree on fact, let alone whether this particular case of AI is harmful versus this one isn't. But calls for regulation and a need for the industry to act in good faith and self-regulate in some respect is really important. And there'll be legislation in this, particularly in Europe, but the US, it's one to watch. I'm going to tie this one with a bow because we'll go on AI all day, and I'm conscious of time here. And AI is certainly a good opportunity and threat. And we've touched on the AI opportunities and threats there pretty well. I should say, Reem, I do use it for the podcast. I want to specify that's to transcribe the show so that I can then put it into the editor. I'm not writing this out word for word and listening it back, believe it or not. Shout out to transcription services. They are very helpful in that respect. Let's talk about one big opportunity and one threat facing marketers from each of us. Just a short sentence. What do we think is the biggest opportunity for marketers heading into next year? And conversely, what's the biggest threat? Marketers, brands, advertisers, what have you. I'll start with you, Reem.
AI and AI.
AI and AI. Amazing. And we've done that to death.
Yeah.
Jyoti?
I was going to say AI as a threat, but I think an opportunity I think that might be growing is social commerce. I think that's one to watch. We're already seeing that with the likes of TikTok Shop and Facebook Marketplace, but I think we'll see that grow.
Pinterest is a big one on this front too as well. They've got their Pinterest Predicts came out recently. They're doing a lot more performance marketing, and that's been something they've done throughout this year, and they've certainly made their platform a lot more shoppable for users that often go on there with intent to buy. So social commerce is certainly booming. And is retail media a part of that conversation now?
I think so. I think you can't really talk about one without talking about the other. So
what are we calling retail media in 12 months, Robin?
Oh, I mean, it's been the success story of the last few years. Retail media, which is basically people identified that retailers have the best sort of data because they've got purchase data, they've got customer data, which is the best kind of performance data, really, and using them as ad networks, which we've just seen grow and grow. Amazon has kind of dominated that, but often one of the interesting things when you talk to retail media is they're kind of two tribes. There's this big Amazon, which is 50% of retail media, and then there's all the others, the Walmarts, the Targets, and then in the UK, Tesco, and all the others doing fantastic stuff. But it's very exciting, that world, and it's only going to grow next year, and it's kind of come out of that need for more opted-in customer data that isn't third-party data. And what is better to know than, purchase and transaction data? You can't lie about what you're buying. That's the stuff you're really interested in, isn't it? It's not like a like on a Facebook page. It's I've actually bought that item. So yeah, that's hugely valuable to people.
Is there a threat that stands out to you next year?
Oh, there's, I mean, just this general geopolitical uncertainty, obviously, and AI is a threat and definitely an opportunity for people. But I think just human ingenuity is an opportunity. In more as more and more people rely on AI, I think that's the differentiator. It's using that stuff as Reem was talking about in smart ways. My two favourite ad, my most favourite ad this year and my least favourite ad this year are both AI generated. And my most favourite one was by Fiverr. Look it up. It's called Nobody Cares. And it's about the customer doesn't care if you used AI, just whether it's been creative and catches your attention. It's a great 30 seconds. It's a musical ad. And it's brilliant. It's all made by AI. And my least favourite AI ad this year was the Coca-Cola Christmas one, even though apparently it's made loads of sales and it's really done. And Coca-Cola have been super smart. But yeah, okay, that's just like, let's just do this. Well, in that case, let's just get rid of creativity. Let's just copy what we did last year. In that case, I mean, it's great. I mean, I'm sure it will sell loads for Coca-Cola, and well done. But two examples, both made by AI this year. And funny enough, my most and least favourite ads.
I like the human ingenuity point as an opportunity because that is a big one, and I think that's, for me, what's going to carry the industry forward into the biggest threats. I think it continues to be macroeconomic instability, and that's the results of the US election. I think, to be clear, macroeconomic instability stemming from the US election, that would have happened regardless of the result because there's a myriad of different ways that was going to go. And the one we've landed, certainly Trumponomics, we talk about the tariffs, we've jumped into the regulation. There's going to be impacts for marketers and advertisers and brands, and they're going to have to adjust to that. Same here in the UK as well. We've got a new Labour government, their budgets, we were talking about this last week, Jyoti, where inflation's gone up, interest rates probably going to stay higher. What does that mean for media inflation?
And also, you're forgetting it's still early days in the UK with the new Labour government. We're yet to see the impact of that. So I think there's still going to be an element of uncertainty, like you said,
Absolutely.
Joe.
And the conflicts going on in Europe, in the Middle East as well, that remain ongoing. Who knows what comes from them in next year and even beyond. So the continued fact that nothing is ever really unprecedented anymore just rings very true to me heading into next year. Of marketers, brands, you're going to have to be incredibly agile. You're going to have to try and get ahead of things when you can and predict trends, but also be reactive when invariably we'll be sitting here in 12 months' time talking about the year just gone, and who knows how many big things are going to have popped up and happened in the world of advertising and beyond that haven't come up once in today's discussion. So I think that's where things are headed. But human ingenuity, Robin, that's the theme of this discussion that brings hope to everyone. Before we finish this final episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast season, Christmas themed, everyone, let's go around. Favourite Christmas movie? What are you recommending to the listeners? What have you got to watch this season if you haven't already?
Was the idea that we gave the plot first and then we didn't say the name of the movie?
You want us to do a guessing game, charades?
I thought that was the idea. I wasn't sure before we jumped in or anything.
Absolutely, go on ahead. Sure, let's give it a crack.
I know, but I should have cut that bit out when I actually checked before.
It's on video. Everything's in this whole one. I'm not editing video.
That's terrible.
Do you want to tell us about your favourite Christmas movie?
Yeah, no, because I was trying to trick you. I thought that's what the idea was. Oh, okay. Okay, well, my idea was, my favourite Christmas movie, I thought about this, is where a hard-working entrepreneur gets mentally and physically tortured by a bunch of puppets.
Oh.
A hard-working entrepreneur gets mentally and physically tortured
Christmas Carol?
A Muppet's Christmas
Muppet's
Carol.
Christmas
That's
Carol,
the one.
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
You're a fan of the
I'm a
Muppets
big
Christmas
fan of
Carol?
it. Yeah, and I can do a good
don't mind
impression of the Muppets. So.
Go on.
Well, now.
Yeah.
Okay. I could do Miss Piggy.
Great.
Okay, go on.
Creamy. Oh, creamy. There you go. It's like she's in the room. There we go. I could do a
That's
Michael
her
Caine
social
impression.
A Muppets Christmas Carol,
Okay.
a classic, Robin. And
I think it's great. The songs are great. It's very Christmassy. It's a lot of fun. It's childhood as well. It's from the 90s. So
nostalgia.
yeah,
amazing.
nostalgia.
Reem, what about you?
Am I doing guessing?
You don't have to if you
I
don't want
thought
to.
that was the idea. I thought I missed the brief.
Okay. Negligent parents leave their child in a dangerous situation.
You're
Home
a big
Alone.
Home Alone fan.
Home Alone
The
2.
first or the second?
The one with Donald Trump in.
Yes,
That's the second.
That's the second one.
Yeah, he's in the
Yeah.
second one.
I guess the
Let's
third
forget
one
that.
as well, to some
There was a
degree.
I
right?
didn't like the third
That
one.
didn't have Macaulay Culkin in it.
No,
did it?
no.
That's lost me there.
Home Alone
Second
1,
one is
Home
New
Alone
York.
2.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
Second
New
one,
York.
then
But the
second
first
one
one
is
was
the-
that's really negligent to lose your child twice, isn't
Yeah.
it? Really?
Yeah.
They were just
Another
bad
classic.
parents.
It's
Yeah.
just horrible.
Josie?
So mine's it's a British film, and it depicts a lot of different couples.
Love Actually.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I didn't have to
I
say
love
too much.
I'm trying to think up a rogue one to maybe get
Yeah.
some
Thing is,
fun, but
they're-
I love Love Actually
Yeah,
too.
they're classics. All the ones we've said, and every Christmas, come December, you can't not watch them.
The Alan Rickman, the Emma Thompson. We're talking about this. Was it Emma Thompson? Yeah.
Yeah, Sam Thompson.
That was such that whole bit of it. I think that's an amazing story.
It's-
Really
I think
good.
it's almost
Joni
iconic
Mitchell
now,
CD.
right?
I love it because there are some storylines within that I think are so good and so pure and real, like the Alan Rickman, Emma Thompson one.
Yeah.
Then there are other storylines within it that are so bad,
Oh,
rom-com.
that guy
Like-
that goes to America. My God, I
Oh,
watched that
yeah.
recently. I'm like, that does not make. Well, anyway, that's not
Yeah. My one, the only debate around this is whether or not this is a Christmas movie. And
Nightmare Before
Oh.
Christmas.
no,
Oh,
No.
Die
Can anyone-
Hard.
Die Hard. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. There you
That's-
go.
I
To me,
really-
it is just because it reminds me of the season, and I always watch
It's
it
great.
at the season.
It
and
is
it is a
a
bit
Christmas.
of
It's
It is
set
a
in
good
Christmas
film,
party. There's loads of references to Christmas, and I really want a T-shirt that says, "Now I have a machine gun, ho ho ho." That's the ultimate Christmas jumper for me, because that's a great Christmas.
Are
We
you,
watched it last
are
year.
you hinting someone to
Oh
get you
yeah,
for your
Secret
Christmas?
Santa. Yeah, there you go.
You know what? Next year, maybe we'll be back with just that for you.
Yeah,
Robin.
that'd be
Who knows?
fantastic.
Everyone can wait with bated breath until our end of year episode 2025. Let's not think about that right now. There's so much between now and then. But that rounds out this editorial episode of the show, the final one of the season. Jyoti, Reem, Robin, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you back in studio in the new year.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Joe.
Joe.
Thank you, Joe.